This is the weekly review for the week of April 24th to April 28th, as well as this week's Sunday preparation. So, coming into the week, I didn't have a bias because previous week was just consolidating. So, I wanted to see if I could use the new week opening gap as a draw for some type of play like I did last week. And Monday, I did annotate a few things, but there was really nothing clear for me on Monday's price action because price was just gravitating around that new week opening gap um, without presenting any setups for us to draw back up into it, right? Where last week we were extended away from that new week opening gap and we had long opportunities down here um, to use that new week opening gap as a draw. Um, but nothing for me presented itself on Monday. So going on a Tuesday, I finally switched over to the live data for E-mini. So no more US 500 charts. Um, so Tuesday, there was still no bias for me. I was still operating on that this week was potentially going to be another consolidation week. Um, but I did note a setup in the 9:30 to 10:10 window where we had a failure swing with London high and we went above the 8:30 New York price, took some short-term buy side, and then had this displacement down. So all inside this hourly fair value gap. So the confluence of all of those things made me tape read this short setup here, um, setting a limit in um, at the mean threshold of the displacement range, and then targeting the nearest sell side, which was down here. So this was a nice trade that I noted, but again, there was no bias for this trade. This was just based off what price was telling me. I had no idea what this week wanted to do. Um, so yeah, and then I did note this other setup here on M1. For me, it wasn't as clear as the previous one, just because I was looking at this low resistance liquidity run, but this wasn't really large enough for me. Um, but I still did note how we had a SMT with London low, broke market structure up, and came back down to the breaker and fair value gap and completely filled in this um, low resistance liquidity run. Ideally, I would have wanted something like this to be much larger. So if the low resistance liquidity run was all the way up here too, that way I could target the low hanging fruit, so below the mean threshold of that low resistance liquidity run would be more high probability. But this ended up playing out, and we went back up into the M5 fair value gap from this previous short opportunity. And if I believe that was all of this, oh no, there was actually a setup in the PM session. After we had this break down here in PM, because lunch was really just consolidating or consolidating slash chopping down. Um, I think after seeing this, it's kind of clear that the new week opening gap is not going to be the draw on liquidity anymore, and price is showing some type of movement and wants to get somewhere. So we've been looking at ICT and the rest of us have been looking at these daily equal lows for quite some time now. The ones that are just above. Oh man, this is so messy. The daily chart. The daily equal lows right above the weekly fair value gap. So ICT was talking about the weekly fair value gap for some time now, and that low, and this low here. Um, so on Tuesday PM session, we were pretty close to those lows, and it was clear that that's probably what price wanted. And I did annotate this potential short setup. It wasn't super clear just because this was one really big consolidation. Um, but we did have this raid of a high in the consolidation with SMT, broke market structure down. We had buy side taken, so the last hour is going to take the opposing liquidity. And we also had these equal lows of the consolidation, which also matched up with the equal lows on the daily chart. So I just did note this because the logic was kind of there. It's just that the setup itself wasn't super clean because it was within this larger consolidation. Um, so at the end of Tuesday, because we dipped into that fair value gap, I wanted to see what type of reaction we would have away from it, or if we would just break down through it. Because ICT said that the reaction we have off of this weekly fair value gap is going to determine whether we go higher or lower, or if price wants to see buy side or sell side on the higher time frame. So coming into Wednesday, this was 9:30 open here. So I was just waiting for 9:30 as usual because I didn't see anything clear prior to that. And really 9:30 just did consolidation. Um, but the 10 to 11 window did give a setup where we had two bullish SMTs, and this right here, that bold line is the mean threshold of the weekly fair value gap. So we have a few confluences here where we took previous day's low with NAS SMT, and then this short-term low with SMT. We have equal highs resting up here. We hit that mean threshold of the weekly fair value gap, and we started having displacement away from it on the 1 minute, and this low resistance liquidity run up in here. Now, the majority of this low resistance liquidity run had already been filled prior to the RTO. This one, even though the bias was kind of clear here, um, I personally would have liked a little bit deeper of a retracement into discount here that lines up with the M1 breaker. But I did note that the RR permitted you to enter right at the top of this multiple time frame inefficiency. So M5 all the way down to M1, all of these are fair value gaps. And you still have a good 1.8 R targeting this buy side here. And you could also see that this is kind of accumulation, manipulation, distribution. So all of those kind of confluences is why this long setup played out. So this entry, looking back, it wasn't so bad, even though I would have preferred getting in here at the M1 breaker for additional confluence. But that was a setup for that silver bullet setup for the 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. window, taking out the buy side. And in terms of clear setups, that was really the only thing for me. We did have a SMT with London high, broke market structure, and then just at the top of the PM session, we hit that RTO. This wasn't as clear as this setup here in terms of confluences. That's why you just take this setup and you're done for the day. So price did its thing. It came back down deeper into the weekly fair value gap, and we made the low of the day here. I tried to look for a potential long setup here, but there was nothing presented. Price really moved after 4 p.m. So nothing again in the last hour of trading. Everything was between that 10 and 11 a.m. window for Wednesday. But oh yeah, it was a good trade. So Thursday, I was watching price and I had a little bit more clarity that I wanted a long setup because we had a previous day low SMT. So we still held at the end of Wednesday, we still held the SMT where we took Tuesday's low, but NQ did not take Tuesday's low, right? So Tuesday made the low of the week. Wednesday made the low of the week here. And started seeing price drift up. And we took prior to 9:30. We had 8:30 news, and we took these equal lows with SMT here. Broke market structure to the upside and created this M15 breaker. And in addition to that, we had relative equal highs with previous day high. And on the daily chart, we had a daily fair value gap here. So my bias was that regardless of what price wanted to do so this was Thursday, right? Had this daily fair value gap. Regardless of what price wanted to do, whether we were going to go higher or lower, that daily fair value gap was the draw on liquidity. And right below that daily fair value gap was the previous day high with equal highs. So we were either going to dip up into this daily fair value gap and go lower, or just blow through the daily fair value gap and go higher. And that's obviously what we did. But regardless, again, of whether we were going to go higher or lower, it was still highly likely we're going to draw into that daily fair value gap, which is why on Thursday, with all of these other confluences, this raid here, SMT, I was looking for a long setup. And we had that M15 breaker here with the also additional confluence of M5 fair value gap. So I set a limit here at the breaker and fair value gap. Unfortunately, the entry was swerved, but the bias ended up playing out beautifully. I did note this setup here. I didn't take it. I was just watching it because I wanted to get in on the breaker. And even watching this live, I thought I was going to get an entry in here because we created even more equal highs with the previous day high up in here. So we're building tons of buy side right below that daily fair value, or right under that daily fair value gap. But no entry for me here. I was watching this, and if I had taken this live, I would have gotten a stop out because price dipped down into that fair value gap in here, but we fell short a few handles of the equal highs here, and that's what I would have been targeting. So it would have gone a few points below my TP and then reversed and stopped me out. So this wasn't super clean, in my opinion. But yeah, and even though we had this break in market structure, because of that higher time frame bias, I wasn't seeing this as a short. And I also have this bearish SMT here that we had with NQ, right? And I wasn't paying attention. I was disregarding this SMT and I was anticipating it to fail because of all of the confluences that we had for a long setup. So yeah, that's why I disregarded this break-in market structure. So the bearish break-in market structure. So I felt that this would have been the easiest, just low-hanging fruit setup, given that all of the confluences that we had. And that was pretty much the setup for Thursday. Didn't really identify anything else for the rest of the day. We just churned up higher, and then the last hour of trading didn't give anything. We just consolidated, and we went back up into the new week opening gap here. So Thursday, very good logic in terms of how price played out. Got the narrative right, just no entry, unfortunately. Was swerved by literally a few handles. 2 handles, pretty much, or 3 handles, because considering spread, just 3 handles got swerved for that entry. So Friday, coming into Friday, I still had the bullish bias, but I was going to see if we wanted to retrace deeper into this low resistance liquidity run up in here. We didn't need to do that because 930 and onwards just had bullish price action. So we just dipped in the low resistance liquidity run here briefly. And also we used the daily fair value gap, this bearish fair value gap, as an inversion level, hit it and went higher. So going down into the M5, we had this SMT with NAS, broke market structure higher here, all prior to 930. This wick here, I also noted in my journal, ICT always says to like disregard these because this was news here at 8:30, and you see the news just took buy side and sell side. So usually these wicks are like confusing for me, but I remember ICT said to disregard these wicks. So I'm just kind of imagining this wick isn't here, and this is just a clean break in market structure up. So we had that failure swing, broke market structure up higher, and then this was confusing for me live, but in my journal I noted that the business had already been done here with this raid, which is why 930, all it did was return to this M5 for value gap, right? We didn't have any raids on liquidity 930 on. We just went up higher. And if we retraced a little bit, it was just into a fair value gap. Because this was with NAS. So NAS made that lower low here at 8:30. It made the low of the day. Where S&P made the low of the day here at 5. So we had that bullish SMT break in market structure. We didn't need to take any more liquidity. And because the bias is bullish, and why is the bias bullish? Because on the daily chart, we closed above this daily fair value gap here, right? So we violated a bearish PD array, and we're coming off of a higher time frame bullish PD array. So this is extremely bullish, which is why on Friday, the drawn liquidity is previous day's high, because if we're bullish, previous day's high are likely to be taken and previous day's lows are likely to be respected. So that is why we see here these fair value gaps being respected up until previous day's high. And previous day's high would be the low-hanging fruit drawn liquidity for me. I didn't take any entries here. Now, after we took previous day's high, I was watching this M5 fair value gap here, and I was seeing if we wanted to respect it or not. I didn't want to buy it blindly, so I went down into the M1 to see if M1 PD arrays would be respected after dipping into this M5 fair value gap. And we had that here. Now, I took this setup here, and I feel like this setup was a little bit too late. This one would have been more ideal to take, where we dipped down, broke, had a market structure shift here, and came back down into the fair value gap created here, as well as the order block. And then you could target your 5 handles or take partials up in this low resistance liquidity run buy side, and then your final partial up here. I entered a little bit late, and we swerved that entry here because, I mean, the take profit here, because we had a SMT with YM, so just a few handles short, and then we had a larger retracement down into the M15 dealing range here. From that low here, the SMT low, to the high, came back down to the new week opening gap, and then continued up higher. And that's why this bearish setup here, SMT, break in market structure, and fair value gap, bearish fair value gap, that setup failed. Now this one definitely would have been tricky because we're making the high of the week here on a Friday. So you could easily see that as we're potentially making the high of the week here, and we're going to go lower because these highs are going to cap the daily range. But at the same time, these are relative equal highs. So again, on the M1, we break market structure here, come back down to this breaker, and then not the most energetic price action, but we kind of chop our way up to take these equal highs. And we don't have any kind of weekly power 3 setup here to go short on. Price really just consolidating here, and then in the last hour of trading, there's really nothing. And price starts moving up aggressively right in the last like 5 minutes here to make the high of the week close to the end of the trading day. So not a bad week this week. Didn't have too many entries though for me, but at least the bias was there. So let's see, don't want to take this out or that. So going into next week, I'm going to be looking for higher prices. We have a bunch of equal highs here on the daily. Those equal highs up in here. And then February high. Right here. And we now have a breaker on the daily chart. And we broke market structure higher here. So I think that the bias going into this week is pretty clear, that we should be looking for longs, and could also actually extend this down here, because on H4 we have that order block right here. And for a value gap here. Yeah. So something like that for this week is what I'm looking for. The only thing is that this week is a crazy news week because we have FOMC and NFP this week, so it's going to be pretty crazy. Hopefully Monday can give us a decent setup, and then probably Tuesday and Wednesday is just going to be consolidation prior FOMC. Thursday maybe something, and then Friday is NFP, and that's usually not tradable. But yeah, we'll see how this bias plays out. But yeah, the narrative for me this week has finally gotten clear compared to the last couple of weeks that we were just in consolidation. So we'll see how it ends up playing out.